Okay, today we're going to be testing 3 different ammos out of the same platform, out of the same type of gun. We're going to be comparing 9mm+P to 40 Smith & Wesson to 357 SIG. And as you watch me stumble around like a forgetful old woman here trying to get things ready to go, I'm going to explain to you what we're going to be doing here. Like I said, I'm going to be shooting all 3 calibers out of basically the same platform, the Beretta 92-96. I'm going to be firing 20 rounds each of 2 different manufacturers in each caliber. The 2 different manufacturers I'm going to use are Hornady. I'm going to use their critical duty line, and Minuteman Ammo, a local ammo manufacturing company. And then at the end, we're going to look at all 3 ammos side by side out of the same platform and see which one you would choose for self-defense. Let's get the shooting out of the way here first. The first thing I did is I shot 20 rounds of Hornady in 9mm+P and 20 rounds of the Minuteman in 9mm+P, and then I figured up the averages. And I'll give you more information on each round and the weight, etc. when I get into actually comparing the results. Now, after I did the 9mm, I moved on to the 40. You might think I would do the 357 SIG second, but I actually consider the 40 the middle caliber here. So next, I shot 20 rounds of the Hornady and 20 rounds of the Minuteman ammo in 40 Smith & Wesson. And then finally, I moved up to what I will actually say, to be upfront here, is my favorite caliber, my favorite semi-automatic caliber, the 357 SIG. Once again, I fired 20 rounds of the Hornady ammo and 20 rounds of the Minuteman ammo, and then figured out my averages. Okay, first let's look at the 9mm+P, which was fired out of my Beretta Elite LTT. Now I shot 9mm+P 135 grain Hornady critical duty, and I have to pronounce Hornady like that or else I keep saying horny critical duty. So now the results from the Hornady critical duty, they advertise 1,110 feet per second. I believe that's out of a 4-inch barrel, because out of the Beretta, I was actually getting 1,132 feet per second, which is a little bit better. And that equals out to about 384 foot-pounds of energy. Not too shabby. That would definitely be an effective self-defense round. But when you go to the Minuteman ammo, which is a little bit hotter, it's also a little bit lighter though also. It's a 9mm+P round in 124 grain. I believe they use a Spear Gold Dot bullet, and they advertise it at 1,200 feet per second, a little bit faster. And I also believe that's a 4-inch barrel too, because when I shoot it out of the Beretta, I actually get 1,296 feet per second, quite a bit faster than they advertise, which translates out to 463 foot-pounds of energy. That's definitely a good self-defense round. So neither of the 9mm rounds are very shabby. They're both a good, acceptable self-defense round, but now that we've seen what they can do, let's move on to the 40 caliber. Now, to shoot the 40 caliber rounds, I was using a basic Beretta 96 from my collection. Now, when it came to the Hornady critical duty, I was using a 175 grain bullet. Now, they advertised this bullet at moving at 1,010 feet per second. I actually got 1,018 feet per second. That's pretty close, and that translates out to 403 foot-pounds of energy. In no way a shabby round. Very good self-defense round there. Now, when we go to the Minuteman ammo, which once again is just a little bit hotter, it's a little bit heavier also. It is a 180 grain bullet, and it's advertised at 1,020 feet per second. What I actually got out of it, out of the Beretta, is 1,103 feet per second, which translates to 486 foot-pounds of energy. That is definitely a very good round. I would definitely carry that round for self-defense and feel very confident doing so. But you could actually say that of both of these rounds. Now we get to my favorite, the 357 SIG. And I'm going to be firing the 357 SIG out of my Beretta 96A1 that I have put an EFK Fire Dragon 357 SIG conversion barrel into. Now, when we shot the Hornady critical defense, we used a 135 grain bullet. Now, it's advertised at traveling 1,225 feet per second. What I actually got out of it, out of the Beretta, was 1,300 feet per second even. That's quite a bit better than advertised, and that translates out to about 507 foot-pounds of energy. You're reaching devastating levels here when you're talking about a small self-defense round. That's very effective. Those are very good numbers. But the numbers get even better when you go to the Minuteman ammo, which is loaded a little hotter. Now, it is a little lighter bullet. It's a 125 grain bullet. I think this is also a Spear Gold Dot bullet. And it's advertised at 1,500 feet per second, quite a bit faster. And what I actually got out of it, out of the Beretta, was even faster than that. It was 1,625 feet per second on average. That translates out to 646 foot-pounds of energy. That's definitely no slouch. That's actually getting you into low-end 357 Magnum levels. That is one semi-automatic caliber round that I would definitely feel comfortable carrying. I think you can see here, based on these numbers, why the 357 SIG is my favorite. But before we decide which one is best for a carry round, let's look at all three of them side by side and do a little bit of a comparison here where we can see the numbers for all of them at the same time. Okay, when you look at them all side by side, the 9mm+P, the 40 Smith & Wesson, and the 357 SIG, you can see how they compare here. When you go from the 9mm+P to the 40, there is an increase. It's not a huge increase, but it's still an increase in ballistics. Now, when you go from the 40 Smith & Wesson to the 357 SIG, the increase becomes bigger. No longer is it just like 5%, 10%. Now you're looking at like 25% increase, or even a 30% increase. That's quite a big increase. And when you compare the 357 SIG directly to the 9mm, you're looking at increases in the 50% range. So quite a bit of a difference between the 9mm+P and the 357 SIG. But there's other things than just ballistics numbers. There's other things you have to take into account when deciding which round would be the one you would choose for carry. For example, the 9mm+P. It's not the highest performing round on the list, but there might be lots of reasons why you would choose it. For one, it costs less. So it's easier to stockpile, and it's easier to have enough ammo to practice with. It's also a lighter recoiling round. So if you're recoil sensitive, it might be the round for you. Also, there's a much wider variety of ammo available for the 9mm than the other two calibers. There's a reason you might choose it. Plus, when you go to buy 9mm, it's pretty much always in stock. It's available everywhere. Those are all pretty good reasons to choose the 9mm. Now, when you go over to the 40 Smith & Wesson and you look at that, you might say, well, there's not really enough of an increase over the 9mm+P to make it worth it. But there's one really good reason to choose the 40 Smith & Wesson. It's a much heavier bullet. It's a bigger, bulkier bullet that has more mass. That means because it has such good ballistics, when it does penetrate hard barriers, which it will be very good at penetrating, it retains more of that mass. It tends to be more effective. If you're someone worrying about shooting through windshields, etc., a good bonded 40 Smith & Wesson would be the round for you. So that would be a really good reason to choose the 40 Smith & Wesson. And it still is a little cheaper sometimes and definitely easier to find than the 357 SIG. And like I said, still a little better than the 9mm+P, so that would be some good reasons for the 40 Smith & Wesson to be the round you choose. Now that brings us to the 357 SIG. Now on paper, the 357 SIG looks like the obvious choice, but it does have some downfalls. Now, like I said, it does have a lot of advantages. It's going to do pretty much everything the other two rounds do, but better. The only thing it might have a slight disadvantage on as far as being compared to the 40 Smith & Wesson, it is a bullet with less mass, so it may not maintain as much of that mass after it penetrates a hard barrier, but with these ballistics, it's really not going to lose much going through any hard barriers, especially if you use a good bullet. I mean, really, this round is going to be better at pretty much everything on paper than the other two rounds, and it's a bottleneck cartridge, so it feeds much easier. You have less chance of a misfeed, so it's just a really good round. In my opinion, it's my favorite round. I think it's like the perfect semi-automatic caliber self-defense round. But it does have one major drawback. It is expensive and it is harder to find. That's the only real issue with it. If you're not worried about those things and you're not worried about a little extra recoil, well then I would think 357 SIG would be the obvious choice. But like I say, what's my obvious choice isn't your obvious choice. You might choose a different one from these three options here, and feel free to let me know in the comment section below which one you would choose based on the ballistics and those other factors we discussed. But I think everyone out there knows which one I would choose. If I had to choose between these three, it would be 357 SIG all day, every day.